Okay, here we go. The Three-Body Problem is the first book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy. It is a speculative, alternate history, sci-fi mindfuck of a book written by Cixin Liu, published in Chinese in 2008 and English in 2014. I'm not usually a huge sci-fi reader, not because I don't enjoy the subject matter or the genre, but because a lot of the most revered and classic sci-fi books that have been presented to me are often pretty intimidating and full of technical and made-up jargon that becomes difficult to wrestle with. I tend to avoid them or get partway through them before becoming completely exhausted and wanting to move on to something with a little bit more of an immediate payoff. However, during this quarantine period, thanks a lot COVID-19, I've been stuck indoors quite a bit, and so I've been tearing my way through books left and right out of sheer boredom. I had made it through more than a dozen books this year before I got to a book called Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. A group of friends and I decided to strike up a book club through Zoom in order to reconnect during quarantine, and someone had suggested Stories of Your Life as a good book to start with. Up until this point, most of my sci-fi reading experiences had been with larger texts like Hyperion, and more obtuse and hard to get through stories. Also looking at you, Hyperion. I'm sure it's great. I'll get to it eventually. Stories of Your Life, as you might have been able to guess by the title, is a collection of short stories. As we made our way through the book, tackling a few stories each week for the book club, I found myself consistently wanting to read ahead, but not wanting to outpace my friends. I ended up buying Ted Chiang's other collection of short stories, Exhalation, and I finished that book before we even made our way to the end of Stories of Your Life. These stories instilled in me a true love for science fiction literature for the first time. Reading these relatively bite-sized stories allowed me to disappear into another world for an hour or two, getting lost in the narrative and pondering the questions about the world we live in and the worlds beyond. After making my way through these short stories, I finally felt that I could move on to somewhat of a more taxing endeavor, and so I decided to pick up The Three-Body Problem, which I had heard good things about from a feature on TheRinger.com and from the man Obama himself. Also, it was on sale on Kindle for like $3, so what did I really have to lose? 3 books and 1,500 pages later, I can say that I'm really glad I spent that $3. I want to get into why I think you should read this book and the 2 sequels, but I don't want to spoil anything too excessively because I went into this series pretty much completely blind, and I think that made the experience that much more special, so I'll try to be careful. With that said, the basic premise for the book, and the series as a whole, is that humanity has made contact with an alien race called the Trisolarans, who have decided to make their way to Earth from light years away because their homeworld has become uninhabitable, and they see Earth as a welcome destination to start up shop. Their homeworld is in orbit with not 1, but 3 different suns, which orbit each other in such a way that Trisolaris enters a chaotic era from time to time and becomes completely uninhabitable for long stretches. The Trisolarans have to literally dehydrate their bodies and put them into storage until a more stable era occurs. Entwined in the response to this information that an alien race will be arriving on Earth in 450 years' time are the UN and the various governments of the world, as well as the somewhat secret militant group known as the Earth Trisolaris Organization and its various factions. The ETO comprises a group of scientists, government officials, and other high-minded, educated people that are unsatisfied with the world affairs in relation to the forthcoming alien invasion. The ETO is a really interesting and complex, albeit shady as fuck, organization which plays host to a slew of characters that keep you glued to the page whenever they come into frame. A main focal point in the book involves an immersive virtual reality video game that the protagonist stumbles upon, created by the ETO in order to indoctrinate people into the organization. The game allows the player to embody various historical figures from Earth's past who are dropped into an alternate history of the Earth that approximates the plight of the Trisolarans, guiding the player over and over again through cycles of birth and rebirth of civilization as the world progresses through successive stable and chaotic eras. I know this might not sound like the most interesting thing in the world, but these passages of the book are wild, and every time one chapter would end, I couldn't wait for our protagonist to get back into the game. Throughout the book, we see the interaction of humans with the Trisolarans, and and the way in which the Trisolarans start to fuck with humanity in order to keep them from progressing scientifically, and therefore keep humanity at bay as less of a threat for when the Trisolarans finally arrive. One of the ways they decide to interfere with humanity's progress includes the development of 11-dimensional supercomputers that spy on every surface of the Earth and cause mass hallucinations. The sections explaining this technology, and a lot of the book in general, is very science-y, which can seem sort of intimidating at times, but those passages are so well worded and mind-blowingly cool that you'll find yourself wanting more and more of it. Plus, it's a science fiction book, so it's kind of what you signed up for in the first place, so, you get what you paid for. One of the things that makes the story unique, especially to a Western audience, is that the story is told through the lens of Chinese citizens, and at least in the first book, through the lens of people that lived through the Chinese Cultural Revolution of the 60s and 70s. This might seem too foreign to some, but I promise that it's as digestible as it could possibly be for a Western audience. What this backdrop provides is a whole different perspective through which we can view how humanity might handle an alien invasion if it happened in a week, in a few hundred years, and how a nation's past and the scars that people have accrued throughout their life can influence the decisions that one might make in such a situation. With these basic plot points laid down, the story continues on, and we see how humanity chooses to respond to this massively existential threat. The first book covers the time from the start of the Chinese Cultural Revolution through present day, which is in the book is around 2010-ish. They don't really get too specific about it. With the second book covering the next 200 years and the third book going even further into the future. A facet of the series that really drew me in is that as the reader, you follow the story through the lens of a handful of different characters as the story progresses from chapter to chapter, and even more dramatically different characters from book to book. The protagonist in The Three-Body Problem, as well as the protagonist in its two sequels, The Dark Forest and Death's End, are by and large really normal, unassuming individuals. They haven't been imbued with some sort of special serum that makes them transcend humanity, or they haven't been born the subject of some esoteric prophecy. All three main protagonists are relatively ordinary people that get thrust into these outlandish and extraordinary situations through which they navigate their way to varying degrees of success. Their stories become intertwined through the deeds and by passage of time, with the actions of the protagonist in The Three-Body Problem becoming crucial to the success of the protagonist in Death's End. And that leads me to the main reason why I love this book and the series as a whole, which is that as much as the story revolves around an alien invasion, the story is really all about humans and how we react to the threats to our existence, and more specifically, how we survive and overcome what sometimes seems like insurmountable odds. In the face of the global pandemic we're currently experiencing, it's both sobering and encouraging to see how we might approach the end times in this fictional world. Not because the books portray our survival as some sort of unearned inevitability, but because it depicts semi-realistically how our flaws and our egos and our various political agendas can get in the way of what really matters in challenging times. Reading these books felt sort of like staring in the mirror and seeing exactly what you don't want to see staring back at you sometimes. But there's also hope and resilience and adamant persistence in the story too. I think there is plenty of inspiration to be taken from the lives of the individuals in these books, and at least for me, these stories have helped me navigate my fluctuating emotions as the months go by during this hellish year. I could talk about these books all day, but I feel like I've said enough, maybe more than enough, maybe not enough, I don't know, this is my first time doing this. But I'll leave it at that and let you guys discover the rest for yourself. Thanks for watching my video, and if you liked what you saw, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a like if you want. Have you read The Three-Body Problem? What did you think of the book? Feel free to comment down below. I really enjoyed making this video, so expect more in the future, probably. We'll see. But anyway, have a good one. See you later.